Welcome to Sovereign Mamas, the podcast sanctuary for visionary women who are building lives, businesses, and legacies in alignment with their feminine power. I'm your host, Julia Jerg, intuitive business coach, mama of two, and systems strategist for solo-led entrepreneurs. Here, we honor both your sacred role as a mama and your wild vision as a changemaker. Expect soul-aligned strategy, raw storytelling, behind the scenes, and powerful conversations that support you in scaling your business without sacrifice. If you're done choosing between success and sovereignty, you're home. Let's begin. All right, welcome to the Sovereign Mamas podcast. Today, my guest is Maria Moreno. Hello, Maria. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Sure. This is fun. We just connected briefly before we hopped on, and you're tuning in from Miami, and I'm here in Bali. And what this brings up for me is it's so fantastic nowadays, that you can connect with like-minded people, with women who have, or not only women, but in our case, with women who are on the same mission, supporting each other, no matter the distance, the location. And maybe let's start off by sharing a little bit your journey as a mother before we dive into what you do in your business.
So, I was actually born in Colombia and moved here when I was 7. And so, from there, yeah, I've been living here in South Florida for the past 25 years now. And I met my husband. And ironically, I actually said I was never going to live in Miami because I preferred the suburbs. And here I am, almost literally, I can see South Beach across the bridge. That is how Miami I'm in. And it's just funny how the world tends to, the universe tends to kind of like guide you in ways that you would have never expected them to be. And yeah, during COVID, I actually became a mom. Um,
Wow.
I went from the classroom, and then, teaching online. And I was pregnant. The due date was actually in December, and I actually had a miscarriage. And I personally say, thankfully, it was the first, it was 6 weeks of pregnancy because I can only imagine if it was longer, And that right there opened up a lot of it opened up my eyes of what really motherhood is, because a lot of people think that you have to have an actual kid or an actual baby in front of you and push them out for you to be considered as a mom. And I didn't know that you can actually start going through postpartum after having a miscarriage, because I'm like, well, I don't have a baby. Why am I gonna have, like obviously being young and, not understanding. And so, yeah, I got diagnosed with postpartum depression, and we were lucky to be blessed with a rainbow baby afterwards. And she was born in February 2021. We were still in COVID. I was learning how to deal with postpartum depression. I didn't allow myself to actually enjoy that pregnancy because on top of that, I had gestational diabetes, and I was very angry at my body. I didn't understand why this was happening. It was just a lot of things. And the same thing the same day that I got diagnosed with gestational diabetes, and they gave me this huge pack of information, was the day that they told me that the baby had VSD, which is a little hole in her heart. And it was just like overload, because on top of that, my husband couldn't be in there with me. Nobody could be in there with me because of COVID. And it was just like super overwhelming. And so that's kind of like how my mother journey kind of like started. Um, yeah. And, a little bit, baby ended up having reflux, allergic to who knows what, because I ended up, like, for my own mental health and my own emotional health, I decided to stop trying to breastfeed her after 4 months, because it didn't matter what I was not eating. The baby was still choking on her own reflux. Um, and yeah, no, she wasn't sleeping. I was sleep deprived. It was, my postpartum depression was worse. The anxiety was worse. Then they started becoming rage, and it was just like, escalating. And then, yeah, I ended up having um, my pediatrician finally was like, why don't you hire a sleep consultant? And I'm like, 6 months later, this is when you tell me that this person can exist and help me out with this? What are you talking about? Um, and so, yeah, no, she went from waking up every 2 hours, like almost an hour and a half to 2 hours, to sleeping through the night after 3 days. That was life-changing. My husband and I were finally turning back into humans, instead of being like robots, right? And then after that, yeah, finally, started working on myself and understood how to kind of like enjoy motherhood, right? Um, and then 2.5 years later, my second one came along,
Mm,
and it's been amazing. I told myself, let's enjoy. Let's enjoy, because I didn't allow myself to do it with the first one because of the fear of losing her. And then the second one around, I was like, even though that thought was still in the back of my mind, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna enjoy this because my husband and I, both agreed two is more than enough. And I know that this was gonna be my last pregnancy, right? Unless there's like a miracle from like the next universe, because my husband and I, like, before we started having kids, we made kind of like an agreement that after a second one he was going to get his vasectomy done, because
yeah.
we wanted to make sure. So yeah, that's basically how my motherhood journey has been. It's been quite a ride, a lot of definitely learning experiences, and
Mm.
it's been wonderful at the end of the day.
And it's also another story that is just so incredible how we, whatever you just in a nutshell put everything in, but then the minutes, the seconds that you live through, I, I can only imagine. And obviously, we all understand as mothers, the 6 months, they feel freaking long. And my biggest mantra, I remember that a friend introduced to me when I was like literally like walking through the day as a zombie and thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. Oh. Then she was saying, it's only temporary, Julia. Oh, actually, no, this was my dad. This was my dad. Yes. And so because he every now and then popped in and out and would be around during the first year of my first son. But it didn't really sink in. I was like, yeah, yeah, but now it feels like, oh, so much. And I'm always in shock and in awe how how we get like we get thrown into this cold water. And it's why did no one tell us about this? This is like this is my number
Yeah.
one thing. Like we need to talk about this. We need to get
Hmm.
out into the world for everyone after us because it's crazy. Like I wish I had someone had like warned me a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that I would love to
Mm,
talk about, because at the end of the day, that a lot of women have shame, or I guess a guilt type of feeling of,
mm,
especially having a newborn and all the intrusive thoughts that come through your head,
mm,
right?
mhm.
And that is something that we tend to keep quiet because we're afraid, I don't know if this happened to you, but it's kind of like a fear of, if I say this aloud, people are going to think
Yeah,
that I'm crazy, or that I'm going to hurt
you're a bad
somebody, or that I'm going
mother.
to hurt myself, or you're a bad mom, or you're going to hurt the baby, right? But one thing that nobody talks about is that we all go through these like intrusive thoughts,
Mhm.
right? Because we're so exhausted. Our brain goes like, our body goes from so much hormones to nothing. And it's just like, and it'll be nice, to have a conversation with somebody that will be willing to be okay, with understanding that we all go through these type of feelings and these type of thoughts. And, thankfully it is. It's what's it called? It's a gift, but it's a curse at the same time, that it's only
Yeah.
temporary, right?
Mm,
Um, and I say that because, kind of like the saying that days are long, but the years are short.
mhm.
My youngest is about to turn 2. And nobody warned me about kind of like the grief that you start experiencing knowing that this one is you're going to be your last, right? That the
Mhm.
baby phase is going away. And I'm here like, why did nobody talk to me about this? Like,
Mhm.
how do you even deal with this, you know? And so, yeah, it's just
So many
the
layers.
so many layers that we can go on and on forever talking about these things, but yeah, that's been kind of like my journey and how it's going, and it's been magical. I personally, even on the harsh days that anxiety does like to hit sometimes, and the depression does tend to sometimes kick in sometimes because if I'm like, if we are having like a sleep regression, right?
Mhm.
The other day, the other night, a few nights ago, my youngest likes the song APT by Bruno Mars, and that caused her a sleep regression. And you have two choices, whether to wake up and be grumpy and just be like, oh, just go to sleep. But I woke up with like, okay, knowing that this is just it's she's about to hit two. This is normal. Having the education and the tools, I
Mhm.
was like, okay, let's go in. So I went in and she's there crying. I picked her up and I started kind of like just cuddling her a bit. Because she's a big cuddler, right? And as soon as I grab her, she giggles. Mind you,
Mhm.
this is at 3 o'clock in the morning. She giggles and then she starts singing. So I'm like, yep,
Yeah.
that's something. Yeah.
It's yeah, it's the way we take these moments, right? And I had another conversation only this morning, and this stuck with me because you know, she framed it so nicely when you have, like you said too, like you have choices. You have always two options in how to respond, and turning it into a comic, like a comic situation where you then like s- maybe switching your anger around and say, this is just like you watch a movie and things go wrong and shit hits the fan, right? And that's when people laugh. So you're in the shit hits the fan situation movie scene right now. Get it out of the system. It's so hard when you're in it, but then once you're self-aware enough and you have, like you say, the awareness that this is temporary, these are phases, appreciate them when they're little and small, then yeah, it's a process, but it does help you a lot. Like I find
hmm
it does help. And yeah, so speaking of tools, so this is then what you how like tell me a little bit how you then went into what you're doing now and offering as a support for mamas.
So with the experience that I had with the sleep consultant, I went from being an art teacher, so I taught middle school and high school.
Mhm.
And yes, I'm a masochist, I guess some people would say, because those ages tend to be, I guess, the hardest ones to deal with. Um, Reality is kind of like just big toddlers. That's what they are. That with big words, but they're just big toddlers, like they're just
Right.
big kids. That's all they really are. They just want love, attention, and time. That's basically what they need, and somebody just to hear them out and not criticize. And and so yeah, so because of this gestational diabetes and because of the baby, they wanted me to go back into the classroom when we still didn't know how COVID was going to affect me or the baby. And so they told me you either come in or you put in your 2 weeks. So I just gave my resignation letter because I was
Wow.
not going to expose,
Yeah.
my baby's life or mine. And I was like, no. So um, after that, I started taking like swimming classes, baby and me classes, and things like that. And I started meeting more moms. And then I started realizing that there's so many moms out there that are sleep deprived. And so I would give them some of the tools that I use with mine. And, like I said, in 3 to 4 days, they were like, oh my God, they're sleeping through the whole night, or they're just waking up once. And one of those moms were like, Maria, why don't you do this? It's like, hey, I
Yeah.
didn't think about that. So yeah, so I got certified um in sleep consulting and newborn sleep consulting. And one of the biggest reasons why I decided to also get certification in newborn is because if you do start implementing all of these, good and healthy habits, sleep habits beforehand, you
Hmm.
kind of already pre-prepared the baby to understand, for you to understand kind of like the tools and for the baby to understand, okay, it's time to go to sleep. And those type of cues that you need, kind of like a rhythm. And then after that, I got certified in special needs sleep consulting as well. Um, and I got certified in becoming a life coach for moms because I realized that sleep deprivation really takes a huge toll on your mental and your emotional health and in your physical health. And if we're not aware of that, it is very hard for us to be able to recover from our our postpartum. So a lot of women, they get told that your postpartum journey is only 2 years, and that is not true. It's actually 7 years.
Mm.
And once you know that and you understand that,
I didn't know
you
that.
will, yeah, yeah. And
And
talking to a psychologist, she didn't know that. And once I told her that, she was like, wow, it makes sense because when she was doing her residency, she did it in a women's center. And she would tell me that there's sometimes that the women's were apparently okay for the first 5 years and then suddenly hit really bad depression and anxiety. And they would
mm,
just call it that, right? And then once I told her that, well, she was like, well, that makes perfect sense why there were so many that would hit like between the 5 and 7 years after having the baby with so many like mental and emotional like health, irregulations because at the end of the day, everybody tells you it's 2 years, but in reality, it's like that journey is like 7 years, Um, it's not only your body, but it's your mental and your just the whole in you is changed, and
yeah,
it's
and
kind of like,
it does make sense.
yeah.
Also, the child, then I always say, once you survive the first 5 years, you're out of the woods, right? But it's actually
Mm-hmm.
five still, and then seven. Yes. Now,
Yes.
my eldest now is 8 years, and I'd say since 1 year, I like completely like obviously he's still a child, but compared to my 6 year old who just turned six, he's still full hands on. And the other one, I was like, okay, go do this, help me here, and I see the difference. I was like, oh, okay, so past seven, you can say, yoo-hoo, you've done it.
Yeah.
Go get a dog.
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of us tend to feel like, I guess, like this mom guilt or like this, um, kind of like the self-confidence,
Hmm.
in motherhood and in like as an individual because we still don't feel like ourselves because we don't have time because we don't have, there's so many different things. And it's like once you understand that it's 7 years, you can you will start giving yourself more grace, right? And that, those 7 years is for you to be able to enjoy your little ones and for you to slowly start like becoming continue becoming the person you want to be, right?
Hmm.
And so yeah, that is how basically I became, I started Mindful Mother because at the end of the day, I'm a big believer that if you're mindful, it's you start enjoying motherhood.
Hmm.
Um, Even when they're having literally a fit because you cut the banana wrong or because you decided to cut the banana, right? Because yeah, we have those type of meltdowns, or because somebody pushed the button and they wanted to push the button, whatever it is. And, now that my second one is becoming two, everything's kind of like coming back to me what two really is like.
Hmm.
And um, a lot of people are like, oh my God, the terrible twos. I don't like it. I don't like calling it the terrible twos. I like
No,
it calling
that's so
the
sweet.
adventurous twos,
Mhm.
right? And and I tell people like it's only the terrible twos because the adult themselves don't know how to self-regulate because
Mm.
they know how to like kids trigger you. That, they don't do it on purpose, but they take out all the traumas and all the triggers and anything that has ever been in your childhood. That is what they bring out. So it's up to you as the parent to learn how to self-regulate so that way they can use those tools, right?
Mm. It's so interesting because I feel like entrepreneurship and motherhood has so many similarities. And one thing too, like it reminded me when when you were talking that it's actually the most spiritual path. Like it's you have to look into the things. You have to look inwards, and only if you do that, you can be the sovereign mama or the sovereign like leader in your business. And there's no way out. Or you live through chaos and drama every day. That's true for your
Hmm.
business. That's true for your relationship with your children and with your partner, right? So it's a
Yeah.
catalyst, and so they're really gifts. It may seem like we don't understand it until we're actually in it, and then we're like, okay, that also does motherhood or entrepreneurship. Aha, okay, it's also about me, like, and yeah, but I feel if not now, when, right?
Hmm.
It's a great opportunity to look inwards, to work on yourself, to become that person, to be a role model, and
Hmm.
really like that's always my biggest motivation. Like, if they weren't around, I'd I'd let myself go in many areas and in many ways. But no, I have two children watching. Of course, I get my act together, and yeah, I want to be the best example, and that's really, yeah, I love it. I grew into this, and I feel a lot of women like work that you are doing and with the mission that we're on here, that is truly close to my heart, because if you had more conversations like this and people are listening to it in the preparation phases, imagine how well prepared a mother could like walk through this, and then
Hmm.
different the experience can be. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
cool what you're doing.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the reason, I decided to create, five different programs depending on what stage of motherhood you're in, like
Mhm.
before pregnancy, during pregnancy, the
Yeah, cool.
postpartum stage, depending whether you're in the toddlerhood or you're already like in the childhood
Mhm.
phase. And then, the empty nesters, because that's another one that tends to be also hard. You go from being a mom to kids that are already adults, and then a lot of women tend to get lost in that phase too of like, okay, so now what, And kind of like you said, if like for example, if I had those tools from the beginning, and that's the reason I decided to build Mindful Mother, I would have been able to enjoy my pregnancy. I would have understood what was going on in my body when the miscarriage was happening, because
Mm.
I got completely dismissed when I asked that question to that OB. So I changed OB like 5 times. If
Wow.
anybody's listening in here and you're like, I don't know if I should, no, change. Like if you are not okay with them, just find somebody that you're comfortable with, right? And so I actually asked this doctor, I was like, hey, what are the signs if I'm going to have a miscarriage? Because one of my friends, like a year before, had a miscarriage, and she told me that there's usually a 50% chance, especially if it's the first pregnancy. And when she told me that, that was always in the back of my head. And so, I thought it was a logical question. How do you know?
Hmm.
And this man just looks at me and he was like, listen, don't think about it like that right now. Everything looks great. Just stay positive. That was his answer.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, when that happened, obviously it had to be on a Friday after hours. I was by myself. My husband was working. It was COVID. Yeah, that type of pain, I don't know how to describe. Like it's a horrifying type of pain, um, physically, mentally, and once like your body clears out everything, the type of guilt that you feel because your body finally feels kind of like relieved is just crazy. And for the fact that, we're constantly as women and especially as moms, we're constantly getting dismissed. Um, we're constantly, getting questioned,
Mm,
right? And it's kind of like if you have the right tools, you will learn how to advocate not only for yourself but for your child, right? And how to do that without, escalating to where some of us could go into like, just complete chaos. And um and so yeah, so those are things that, like I wish I would have had
mm,
when, that I had when I knew that I wanted to be a mom, when I became a mom. And it's kind of like, okay, seeing how many women go through this, I wanted to build something. And it's just been a wonderful experience to be able to help other moms, prepare. Even my sister, for example, my sister did not want to have kids.
mm,
She was absolutely terrified.
mhm.
Terrified. To the point that she even told her husband, like, listen, you know what? I don't think I want to have kids. Like, in case you want to, like, a divorce, I will be okay with that and respect that. Like, that is how much she knew, or
Mm.
at least she thought she knew that she didn't want to have kids. And
Let me guess, she has one
surprise,
now.
she has one.
Wonderful.
Yeah, she has. So she has one, and 6 months after giving birth, she got diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer at age 29.
Oh my.
hmm And that's another conversation that a lot of people don't like to talk about is like, um, once again, kind of like talking about doctors is kind of like she had a huge red flag that she lost, I believe, 30 pounds in 1 month. And they didn't even, they just like went past by them and didn't notice that. And so that's usually one of the early signs of having cancer. And 6 months later, of course, with all the hormonal changes, it makes cancer cells grow faster and spread faster, right? And that's how it became a stage 4, if a matter of 6 months.
Wow.
And yeah, no, it's been a crazy ride. And then she tells me because I helped her with the sleeping and when she feels this guilt. And for example, yesterday she was telling me, she's like, I feel like such a crappy mom. And I'm like, girl, you just came out of chemo. What are you talking about? And she was like, yeah, no, I feel like a crappy mom. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Listen, you put out with coming out of chemo. She's
Mm,
like she has a chemo that she has to be on her for until like for 2 days. Um so she has three types of chemos and then she goes home with one of them. And I'm like, what do you mean? You're an amazing mom. You literally you even had took out energy that you didn't know you had to do the bottle for the baby, to put the PJs and have all the night stuff ready for him. So
mm,
that way her husband can come and just like, put the PJs, she sits next to him. Even if, and so, having these conversations is just wild what kids can do for you, right? Because I was telling her, I was like, I don't think her journey would be the same if it wasn't for him.
yeah.
It just wouldn't be, right? And it's making her a fighter, it's making her stronger. And it's just wild that even if we're sick, we still manage to
Mm,
give more than what we would ever expect. And it's just motherhood at the end of the day is a superpower. And a lot of us forget that we're wearing that cape, even those days that we're like, "Ugh, I just make him mac and cheese. Ugh, I'm such a bad mom. I should have done, give him vegetables and this." And, we start reprimanding ourselves. And it's like, no, girl,
yeah.
you gave him food. Good for you, like, or you got up and you dressed them. Like, look at you, you need that kind of like person of like,
Right.
there you're doing it. You're
Mm,
doing it.
so true. So true. It's I'm even getting emotional when you share all this. This is so yeah, it's a wild ride and it's something that yes, family and friends step in and it's great that you can support your sister. And I think a lot of women can resonate with this story, even, even if it's not in a at a level where they're physically sick or going through something like your sister, but a normal flu can be feeling
Mm-hmm.
like that, and then you still show up. And yeah, so I love that you say that. It's um it's very true, and there should be signs all around, and cheerleaders for moms. And I hope that whoever listens now, because everyone has those thoughts and
Hmm.
everyone goes through it. It's the intrusive thoughts. When you spoke earlier, I remember I felt so guilty thinking when my first one, I was breastfeeding for 2.5 years, which was quite long, but I had this image and this wish for him to just be like nourished for as long as possible. And it was a beautiful journey, and I always like enjoyed it until to a point where I didn't. And that was for me the hardest, then to deal with my emotions and feelings, and to wanting him to stop and have this actually like really harsh feelings towards him. And I was like, what is this? How can something that used to be like us, this is our moment, like this is me really giving nourishing, and now I just hate it. I literally
Hmm.
hate it. I was like, this is and I was like, okay, hang on. Am I a bad person? And all these things that pop in. And because like, where can you find someone to say, I'm just hating this, right? Where can you do this? And so, yes, we could
Yeah.
really, there's different layers, there's different areas, there's so much that needs to be addressed. I definitely will connect you with someone I talked to this morning, and there's a lot going on. And once you see that there are other women and other people supporting each other, it opens up these little bubbles and doors, and where you say, oh no, I'm actually not alone. So all these
Uh-huh.
connections leads to more connections, which I love. So yes, let's hope for more women to be inspired to support each other. That's definitely something I want to be doing here and am doing with the Sovereign Mamas movement. So whoever feels inspired to reach out to you, Maria, obviously we have all the information and links in the show notes. But what's your most favorite way to get started with you, to get in contact with you? Maybe share with the listeners.
I guess, if you have Instagram, I guess that's one of usually the easiest way that a lot of people tend to contact me. My handle is mindful mother underscore sleep. And yeah, you can go ahead and DM me, or you can email me at mindfulmotherllc@gmail.com, and I'll be more than happy to, start a conversation. And, yeah, if you do decide to come, my way, I can tell you this much. I'm not here to judge. I'm the last person to judge, because at the end of the day, like I said, we all go through, different areas, different levels, but we all go through very similar stages
Mm,
of, the frustration, about the exhaustion, about, like those intrusive thoughts, that guilt, that, the self-care and the self-love, and how low it can get. Even, looking at yourself postpartum body, of like what it was and how it is now, and how do you start loving this new body, and it's kind of like, you need that one person that tells you like, hello, you just grew a human. You were literally two-person human. Like, understand that. Like, and that is I used to
big
like
deal.
literally criticize my dad when he would like tell me like motherhood is and he would tell me that like such a beautiful thing, and it's just beautiful when you become. And I looked at him and I was like, you're not a woman. Why are you telling me this? You don't know what it is. And this was before me even thinking that I wanted to have kids. And I was like, I don't think I want to do that. You are just putting your mental, your emotional, your whole physical, and I was just like reprimanding him of like, how dare you tell me how great this is when you don't even know what it is.
Hmm.
You've seen the glimpse of it, right? And yes, all of those things are true, but the unconditional love that you get is just, it's undescribable. Like, I don't have words
Mm.
to describe what that brings, of like that joy, and like Another thing is like a lot of people would think that sleep training, for example, is putting your baby, let them cry it out. No judgment here if you have ever done that, but for me, I don't, that's not a method that I recommend, like that I would recommend because there's nicer, more gentle ones, because it all depends on what your postpartum journey is and what the personality of your kid is and things like that. And you know, you will hear myths like, oh, if you sleep train, the bond is not going to be there. Let me tell you something. Both of my daughters are sleep trained and they're like little pieces of gum that just don't detach. Like, my second one, I also had allergies. I breastfed her for a month because we ended up in the ER because she was um bleed like her stool like had blood in it. And so I literally looked at the doctor and I'm like, that's it. I'm done because I'm not going to go through this mental load once again. So I'm going to stop and we're going to figure out which formula is going to work for her, which one is going to keep her healthy, which one I'm going to be sane. Like I need to make sure, because at the end of the day, it's like this, like forcing me to have to breastfeed. And trust me, if it didn't have any side effects to my daughters, I would have loved to have that experience.
Mm.
But because of the stress, I couldn't produce more than 2 ounces.
Yeah.
You can't feed a baby, 4, 5, 6 months with just 2 ounces. You get me? So it came to a point that I was just like, the first round, I felt very bad and very guilty, very sad about it. The second time around, when I decided to stop, I felt very similar, but I had to realize how it was going to affect the dynamic. And so if you want to breastfeed and you can, it's a blessing, do it. If you don't want to, it's okay. If there's issues, it's okay not to, because at the end of the day, a fed baby is a healthy baby, is a good baby. You're a good mom. We all have different challenges, like for example, my sister couldn't breastfeed, and now we know why, because her body was like not understanding where it needed to go, right? And, at the end of the day, we don't know what the other mom is going to. And that's another thing, the mom shaming of like us as moms are constantly like, and it's kind of like, let's take a step back, look
Mm.
at ourselves internally, and maybe that mom actually needs help
Mm.
or, things like that. So I don't know, motherhood at the end of the day could be lonely. And, we all probably have been there. And
Mm.
just keep searching, just keep looking and see what person, you have the good vibes with, like that resonates with you. So yeah, so if any of your listeners need somebody to just listen to,
Mhm.
I'm always here to listen to. And no, I'm not gonna judge if you're here like, oh my God, my child's so annoying. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have worked with
Welcome
kids
to
for
the
over
club.
15 years. Yes, they are all annoying. We still love them, but yes, they could be annoying. So
I love it. I love it. I think this was an incredible, yeah, summing up the how the work, what you're doing and what motherhood means. I love this conversation very much. Thank you so much for taking the time being here, sharing your wisdom, and I hope a lot of people will get in touch with you because I know they need it. And yeah, thanks for coming on. One last wisdom
thank
drop you would like to share? Anything else? Are you could.
um well, thank you so much for having me. This was definitely a conversation that I love having. And I hope it is useful and helpful for other moms to be that know that you're not alone. Okay. Know that you are doing a great job. And even on those hardest days that you really feel like you're failing, I want you to try to just pause for a second and just be like, I got up. I fed my kids. My kids are smiling. Take a deep breath and just continue.
Mm.
Breathing is a huge tool. And if you need to just take a pause, let your toddler have a meltdown, it's okay for you to do that because at the end of the day, if you're taking a deep breath in front of them when you yourself want to throw that tantrum, um, you're teaching them how to self-regulate, and you yourself are self-regulating for you to just continue on with your day.
Mm. Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, amazing. Thanks for listening, everyone. Thank you, Maria, once again. And I
Thank
see
you
you.
again for having me.
Thank you. Bye.